Hello, everybody. This is the Spice Must Flow. I'm back again, and today I was going to do a video, kind of short one, regarding immigration. The title of this is "Immigration is About Political Power" for the Democrats. This comes after a conversation I had on Facebook with a Facebook friend of mine who is what I would call a moderate Democrat, or at least what passes for moderate Democrats in today's world, which is to say, basically, you are um, you are, for all intents and purposes, a fan of most of the stuff that the left in general is a fan of, but you might be pro-life, or you might not want to sink a knife into the chest of every conservative everywhere, uh, or you might not want to end everybody, every church in existence, and he kind of falls into that camp. He's a moderate, right? But what he said to me is we were talking of immigration, and he says to me that the modern social justice warriors do not want immigrants from Africa. Some of the folks that he's spoken to, if those folks are Christian. I was like, that's interesting. Now I don't know statistically the truth of that. Like, I don't know if we were to do a survey of all social justice warriors in America, if they would say, oh yeah, we don't want African immigrants if they're a Christian, right? I have no idea about that. Okay, be an interesting study, frankly. But what he was saying is, they have opinions about gay people. They have opinions regarding religious beliefs in general that make that bad. Would make them not want black people from Africa if those black people are Christian. And I said, no. I was like, well, from a truly conservative viewpoint, we don't really want any African immigrants because we'll lose, right? I said, remove any racial component from this. We don't want black Africans because they're not going to vote Republican. In fact, the statistics say that black Africans vote exactly like African Americans. They vote 90% plus for Democrats. So anytime you import more, the numbers are going to get worse for the Republican Party. And yes, you will have some within a 10% window who might vote Republican, or generally be a little less than that, actually. So I say this, and he's like, "No, you don't get it. You guys have to. You have to. These people are natural Republicans. They would vote Republican. You should be okay with that." I said, "Well, the stats don't bear out what you're saying. They just don't, right?" And he's like, "Well, you're not doing an effective enough job." And I said, "This is a variation on the argument that I've seen out there, which is effectively." Hispanics are natural Republicans, right? It's just a variation on that same theme, right? Well, the voting patterns of Hispanic people tell us that they are not natural Republicans, right? Um, in general, it isn't. It isn't. I'm kind of like, well, you're basically like you're blowing smoke up my ass. It's kind of what I accused him of, right? Like, are you serious, right? And at this point, what I kind of said is, I said, look, from your perspective and from the perspective of the Democrats in general, you don't want anyone who is likely to vote Republican in 5149, right? If it's even 5149, they don't want any group in America. And I brought up the Obama administration ending the wet foot, dry foot policy with Cubans, right? To this day, Cuban immigrants vote majority Republican. It's not a 90% thing, but it is about a 60-40 thing. In fact, they're a big part of what shifts Hispanic numbers to sometimes as high as 40% Republican in elections, right? Cuban Americans are part of what won Florida for Trump, okay? In fact, really, he couldn't have won Florida if Cubans voted like Mexicans, okay? So, I found that kind of interesting, right? And I stated this to him. And I said, I get it. You got, I said, yeah, there might be some social justice warriors who sound exactly like what the alt-right accuses the entire left of, which is wanting to commit white genocide, right? You can look up a variety of people. They're oftentimes on college campuses who talk about white people being evil and how they all need to die and all of that sort of thing. And there's a section of folks that are on the left that are that way. I would say most of the left is in the camp that says, well, all of America will eventually be brown, so it shouldn't matter, right? In general, though, there isn't exactly an animus, if you will, directed against white people directly by most of the left in some sort of, wild genocidal way. They don't think themselves superior or inferior to people of color, to black people, Hispanics, Asians, whatever. They don't ask these questions. That isn't even in their calculus. What is in their calculus is voting patterns, right? That's what they concern themselves with. The best voting percentages you're going to get are from brown people and black people. Seriously, East Asians also are going to vote most of the times for the Democrats. Okay, now there are people who don't. Most of the times they take several generations, but they almost never turn into a Republican voting base. There are certain specific examples. Vietnamese Americans, for instance, in Texas, vote. They basically can go either way. They vote a lot like white people in California, which is to say they split their vote, pretty well down the middle. Okay, you have the example of Cuban Americans, for instance. Okay, although a lot of those Cubans are white people but of Spanish descent, but they are Hispanic. That's what they would answer on government forms, and they go majority Republican, right? And there are various other groups. And I said to him, okay, well, let's take an African group that you would never, that the left would never allow here no matter what. And I said to him that you take the Afrikaners, you take the white people of South Africa. Now, there have been stats that have been done, and we figured out that they go about 80-20 in favor of the Republicans when they enter here. It's a very small number. Not very many of them are in the United States right now. But I said, there's a very good possibility they will be subjected to a genocide fairly shortly. And when I say the Afrikaners, they are basically the descendants of white people that settled South Africa about 500 years ago. They're mainly descended of German, Dutch, and French Huguenot settlers to South Africa, to that part of the world. Okay, and they're very Christian, extremely, extremely Christian. They're very conservative. Okay, they tend to be pro-gun, actually very pro-gun. Interestingly enough, they come here and they become very Republican. And I said, basically the left, knowing how these folks would vote and knowing that most of them, if they come here, it isn't like they're going to love people like black people. They're going to hate black people because they will have come from a situation where black people were trying to kill them, right? I said that the Democratic Party would set up machine gun nests and snipers on our border to make sure they don't enter. It wouldn't just be a matter of, oh, they don't get to come here on a boat. It would be a matter of if they get to Mexico, if the Democrats could find a way, they would find a way to shoot these people before they got in the country, right? I say it, but it isn't so much that they love brown people. If they loved Hispanic people, for instance, they would have no problem with Cubans entering the country, right? And I said to him, if what you're saying about the Africans were really true, the black Africans, I mean, who are Christian from places like Nigeria and whatnot, where they come in, they're solidly Republican voters, the Democrats would never let a single person set foot in this country if they could help it. There's no doubt about it. And that's the thing. I think that we on the right do need to get real about this. The left hates us. Anything that could possibly allow anyone on the right to win is something they're going to try to stop. And it isn't really about race, okay? Not per se. Okay, even this stuff you see that's anti-white out there coming from the left, they're not exactly anti-white in the sense that they hate all white people, but they do hate this image they have of white people who wear camo and shoot guns and talk in Southern accents and go to church and love nuclear families, right? They hate those white people. White people that live in gentrified areas and are not sure as to their gender, who drink $7 coffee, they love those white people, right? So there's this cultural war in which people from overseas are being used as as an army, as a voting army, to get what the Democrats want. It's as simple as that. Once you start to realize that this is entirely politics, okay, then at that point you will begin to understand what this is really all about. And I can tell you right now that if, for instance, while Trump is in office, the genocide of Afrikaners begins and they begin to petition America to get, refugee status, there could literally be death camps set up for them in South Africa. There could be all sorts of evidence that they are an oppressed minority there and that they're all going to die. And I can tell you right now that at first the media would attempt to suppress the information, and then after, if they were unable to do that, and with the internet now, that's a good chance of it, they would then just simply tell lies about these folks. They would attempt to make it so that these are not refugees, because they know that it would be dangerous to let like 4 million people who are going to be some of the most hardcore Republicans out there into the country. It wouldn't be dangerous to the country. They'd be vastly safer than like letting in, Middle Easterners who yell out Allah Akbar and then kill themselves, or shoot up gay nightclubs full of gay Latin men, right? I mean, they wouldn't do that, right? They would be some of the safest immigrants America could ever have, right? But they would be prevented from entering the country if the Democrats could help it. And the reason why is because they would look at that, 4 million people, and 4 out of 5 of them are going to vote Republican. They wouldn't allow it to happen. So, I don't know. That's kind of a reality check. And I stated this to him. And, he basically, he refused to move away from the narrative. He would not move away from the narrative that he had created, which I found hilarious, right? And he just kind of said, well, you guys have to just do better at getting these people who are not in any way interested in voting for you. And I kind of called him on it, too. I said, Black Americans, in general, are socially more conservative than the left-wing white people are. And it doesn't bother you. And you guys totally ignore Muslims who vote mostly for Democrats, right? In fact, they used to have a tendency to occasionally go Republican because of social issues. Now they don't. And, the Democrats, there are activist judges who won't even stop people who we literally cannot vet, right? We're not even talking about the greater social issues. We're not talking about the welfare problems that would come from allowing in illiterate people from the third world. We're not talking about any of this. We're just simply saying, hey, some of these guys might have bombs, so we should stop that. And the judges are like, no. Let those guys with the bombs in the country, man. Because, their relatives, even after they blow themselves up, their relatives will vote for us. So we don't care. We'll let people die, right? And you could say, well, yeah, some of them will be Hispanic, like, all the gay Latin men that were killed in Orlando, right? Well, that assumes that the Democrats actually care about any of the precious people of color they act like they care about, which they don't, right? I mean, they don't care. So, I don't know. There's just a few interesting thoughts. I didn't accept his bullshit, right? I mean, I was like, okay, yeah, whatever, man. Like, I know what you're up to. This is the same thing, right? And as I said, I mean, I don't want the white people of South Africa to all die. This is probably what would begin happening. But it would be interesting that if there was an attempted genocide against them, I do think it would be very interesting to watch the Democrats come up with ways and come up with reasons for which we should not allow in the South African whites. Any rate, though, I don't know. Those are a few interesting thoughts, if you will. The spice must flow, and as always, furthermore, I consider Islam must be destroyed.